What if the thing you spent your whole life chasing, the recognition, the success, the moment your name finally meant something, turned out to be the very thing that made you sick? Not metaphorically sick, actually physically sick, hospitalized, dissociating, losing yourself so completely that you check into a Hyatt under a fake name just to remember what it felt like to be nobody. That's the story Lena Dunham tells in Famesick, a book so raw and confessional it reads less like a memoir and more like a black box recording from the wreckage of early fame. She's the creator and star of the HBO show Girls, one of the most discussed television shows of the 2010s, and she's here to tell you that it nearly destroyed her. Not the critics, not the hate, although there was plenty of that. The thing that nearly destroyed her was the disease she was born with, the one she calls Famesickness, an almost biological need to be seen, celebrated, and known. And what happens when that need gets fed beyond anything you ever imagined? You find out the hard way that you had no idea how to digest it. This is that story. The book opens with Lena at 20, a college student at Oberlin, submitting her first short film to Slamdance, the scrappier cousin of Sundance. She gets in. She drags her two best friends to Park City, Utah, where they share a king bed in a rundown ski lodge with film bros and their weary girlfriends, and the film screens to 12 sleepy people. But something more important happens that weekend. The short that screens right after hers is sharp, professional, puppet-infused, and made by two Boston University undergrads who trip, intentionally, all the way to the stage to take their bow. They are Josh and Benny Safdie, future indie film legends, and Lena immediately adopts them as her creative North Star. Back in New York after graduation, she sets up a tiny office below their collective on Lower Broadway. This becomes her world, a creative dormitory of young filmmakers including Ariel Schulman, Henry Yost, the Catfish Duo, and briefly Greta Gerwig, who would stop by to film audition tapes. Nobody was making money. Somebody built an intercom out of tin cans and twine just to tell jokes between floors. Lena calls this the last innocent time before betrayal and commerce enter the picture. But the innocence fades. Her parents are losing patience. Her odd jobs, medical billing, restaurant hostess, selling couture baby clothes aren't sticking. And she's slipping into a quietly disordered relationship with food and her own body, sneaking into her father's closet to weigh herself each morning after consulting pro-anorexia websites. It's from this place of hunger, literal and metaphorical, that she writes tiny furniture in a few nights in her father's office, using snippets from her mother's old journals she'd secretly been reading. She drops the script in front of her mother on her 60th birthday and says, "Sorry, but I read your journals. This is for us to do together. Happy birthday." Her mother reads it in one sitting, shrugs, and says, "Let's go." They raise $20,000. They shoot in the family loft. The film premieres at South by Southwest, wins the grand jury prize, and Lena gets the call, on a toilet midstream, at the penthouse of a family whose kids all have names starting with J. She screams. Her father asks what a grand jury prize is. Life accelerates. Within weeks of winning at South by Southwest, Lena is flown to Los Angeles for meetings. At HBO, she walks into a room of executives and, in an unrehearsed answer to the question, "What would you want to make?" pitches what would become Girls, a show about young women in New York who graduated during a recession, were raised on Ritalin and AOL Instant Messenger, and were feminists who didn't know how to live their politics. The room is quiet. Then, "Can you write us a page about that?" She writes it that night on her brother's laptop, sitting in a beam of moonlight on her host's living room floor. The next morning, she emails it to HBO. That afternoon, in a Jamba Juice parking lot, she gets the call. They want to offer her a blind pilot deal. Her creative producing team comes together quickly. She meets Jenny Connor, a writer who had worked on beloved shows like Undeclared, on the phone, and it feels like finding a sibling she didn't know she had. Then Judd Apatow emails her out of nowhere. She assumes it's a prank by her friend Isabel, who has a fake email app. It isn't. Judd Apatow is real. He loves tiny furniture, and he wants in. Casting girls becomes one of the most vivid sections of the book. Lena sees over 150 women for the 4 lead roles. She talks about the audition room as a space of dignity. She gave notes, asked for additional reads, never dismissed anyone quickly, because she knew what it felt like to be assessed by men who were too tired to remember feminism. Elizabeth Olsen, Dakota Johnson, Amy Schumer, all came through. Allison Williams gets cast after Judd notices a video of her singing a mashup of the Mad Men theme. Adam Driver walks in, grunts instead of shaking Lena's hand, starts the scene before action is called, bites her shoulder during a scripted half-hug, and leaves without saying goodbye. She doesn't fully understand what she just watched, but she knows she has to cast him. The pilot shoot is 5 days. On the first day, Lena nearly faints from nerves, mistakes 3 bells for a fire alarm, and finds that her entire emotional survival depends on catching Allison Williams's eye and creating a private world within the crowded room. The bed collapses during their first scene. Nobody bats an eyelash. There's a guy for everything. Girls is picked up to series, then to a second season, then a third. The show becomes a cultural phenomenon and a cultural punching bag simultaneously, sometimes within the same sentence. The golden era of New York media snark descends, and Lena is at the center of it. But underneath all the external noise, something more fundamental is unraveling: her body. Throughout the book, Lena traces an escalating medical history. Acute colitis in her 20s, treated with morphine and antibiotics. Shingles and impetigo on her face the week of a Vogue cover shoot. The infection, so severe the doctor says she's contagious and can't wear makeup. An eardrum that ruptures completely while she's cleaning it with a Q-tip. The result of months of accumulated stress, the ear canal bleeding out of her mouth. And underlying all of it, endometriosis, a condition it took a decade to diagnose, during which she was told her level of menstrual pain was normal. These physical collapses are not random. They follow a pattern. Each one arrives precisely at the moment when the pressure of the show, the press, the public expectations, and her own relentless self-demand become unbearable. Her body, she comes to understand, is not betraying her. It is the only part of her honest enough to say stop. There are also the psychological episodes. Several times across the book, Lena describes dissociation, a state where reality feels like it belongs to someone else, like watching your life happen to a distant cousin. During season 1, it lasts for 5 days. She walks on set and cannot feel her own face. She forgets her lines. She directs scenes from a place of complete absence. It takes Klonopin and a snap, like a dislocated joint returning to its socket, to bring herself back. And in season 2, after a devastating series of stressors, Scott Rudin's threatening emails, the ruptured eardrum, working from New York while the writer's room met in LA, her father gets on a plane, takes her to an ear clinic and says, "You're burned out, fucked up, and you look like you haven't eaten in months." He calls Jenny and Judd. It's time for her to go home. The emotional architecture of Famesick rests on 3 relationships Lena describes as the 3JS: Jenny Connor, Jack Antonoff, and Jemima Kirk. Jenny is showrunner, mentor, surrogate big sister, and, eventually, something more complicated. Lena idolizes her completely, adopts her phrases, follows her style advice, needs her approval with an intensity that she only later recognizes as a warning sign. Jenny is also her boss, and the 2 roles blur in ways that cost Lena. When critical press rolls in, Jenny tells her to ignore it, partly out of kindness, partly because it's easier when it's not your name on the screen. When the book scandal breaks, the relationship shows its limits. Lena's reliance on Jenny had become structural, total, and not entirely healthy for either of them. Jack Antonoff arrives like a reward. Introduced by his fashion designer sister Rachel, He shows up to their first date in a yellow-striped women's boat neck shirt under a bright green grandpa sweater with a Daria pin on it. He orders fried chicken and licks his knife while making eye contact. He drives her home in the rain and holds his trench coat over both of their heads like the lovers in a painting. His song, "We Are Young," is #1 in the world. He sends her Moomin dolls from Finland. He drives 3 hours upstate just to spend 2 hours with her and drive back. He tells her he loves her after they share soup from a tranche at a Woody Allen jazz set at the Carlisle. For years, Jack is safety, warmth over abundance. He overorders food, overgifts, overloves in the way people do when they're afraid of what absence feels like. And slowly, as the relationship goes on and his touring takes him farther away for longer, Lena realizes she has outsourced her entire sense of worth to his choosing her. Jemima is Lena's oldest mirror, the most beautiful girl in every room, half Iraqi Jewish and half British, with the restlessness of someone who will never be content. She is cast in Girls 3 weeks after giving birth. She calls Lena to quit the show mid-production and then reveals, without knocking, that she's 6 months pregnant with her second child. She is maddeningly, gloriously unpredictable, and she's the only friend who stays on the ride with Lena when everything else changes, because they are both too high up in their respective towers to pretend they fit in with people who are still figuring out their roommates. Between seasons, Lena writes a personal essay collection called Not That Kind of Girl. She writes about her body, her sexuality, her OCD, her history with assault, and, in a section about childhood, her brother Cyrus. The book sells for a large advance. Before it even publishes, conservative media dissects it and accuses her of childhood sexual abuse. The accusation is a deliberate misreading, she believes, designed to destroy someone they've been waiting to destroy. But it doesn't matter what she believes. It spreads. This section of Famesick is the most painful. Not because of the public response. She eventually gets a darkly funny handle on that, eating 2 street hot dogs aggressively in sunglasses while walking 6 blocks past her destination, but because of what it cost her with Cyrus. Cyrus, she now understands, was not her sister. He is her brother, and he came out as trans around the time the book scandal broke. He was just beginning to figure out who he was when Lena's public life swallowed the space around his private one. He retreats. He doesn't come home. He disappears to Rotterdam anarchist communes and Berlin sofas. When they speak, it's loving but distant. Every apology Lena offers is for the wrong thing. She cannot give him the one thing he needs: space. It takes years, and the distance that writing this new book provides, for her to understand clearly that Cyrus has always been her truest mirror, her clearest companion, the person she was most afraid of failing. She failed him. She writes it plainly, and she writes the slow, tentative process of finding their way back. The final section of the book follows Lena through a series of physical escalations. The endometriosis, finally diagnosed after a decade of debilitating pain, requires multiple surgeries. She describes one surgery in particular, recovery at the Sunset Tower Hotel in Los Angeles, a building she has stayed in so many times she knows every suite, every balcony, every bathtub, lying in bed while the show goes on around her. There is also the addiction story. Klonopin, prescribed legitimately for anxiety in high school and through college, becomes a daily tool. Then more than a tool, each crisis in the book is managed with Klonopin. Each surgery recovery includes it. The transition from medication to dependence is narrated without drama, but with unflinching clarity. She knows what's happening. She cannot stop it alone. Then rehab. She goes. She comes out. She calls it the beginning of the actual third act. Not the one she'd imagined. The endless career ascent. The awards circuit. The borrowed gowns. But the slower, stranger, quieter work of becoming a person who can actually live in her own life. The book ends with Lena looking back at the dedication page she chose. A list of names: Jean Harlow, Amy Winehouse, Robin Williams, Heath Ledger, people she describes as too famesick to be cured. She is alive. That, she says, is the ending she didn't earn so much a stumble into. Famesick is not, at its core, a celebrity memoir. It's a book about the gap between wanting to be known and knowing yourself. Lena Dunham spent her 20s feeding a hunger she'd had since childhood, the need to make something, to have it matter, to be seen. And when that hunger was finally spectacularly fed, she discovered she had no vocabulary for what came after. The book is also about the particular cruelty of being a woman whose work is about herself. Every essay, every episode, every public appearance became evidence in a trial she didn't know she was standing in. The same rawness that made Girls Vital made Lena a target. And the tragedy she identifies is not that the target was unjust. Some of it was, some of it wasn't. But that she internalized the aim so completely she couldn't feel herself anymore without checking first what the internet thought. The title is a diagnosis. Famesickness is the condition of needing to be recognized so badly that you'll keep chasing it even when the chase is hurting you. She dedicates the book to every person who died of it. She writes the rest of it for everyone who is still sick but doesn't know it yet. And the last thing she wants you to know is that the cure, if there is one, isn't obscurity or rejection or choosing a quiet life under a bridge like her father might have preferred. The cure is something harder and stranger than that. It's learning to want the work more than you want the response to the work. Learning to make something for yourself before you make it for the room. She's still learning. So is everyone. That's Famesick by Lena Dunham. If this resonated, hit subscribe. More book summaries every week.